Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg, and your Colonial Champion, Sean McCoy. Welcome to the Court-Martail Podcast!
And welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and children of all ages, to the greatest wrestling podcast by smarks, for smarks, in all the interwebs. It is I, the man of the hour, the man with the power. I'm too sweet to be sour. I'm the Bay Area Brawler. Don't get mad at me or I'll maul ya. You talk shit about the Sharks and I'll scald ya. It's Skylar Greenberg. How you doing? And I am here hosting today's show. That's right, I'm hosting today's show. Just like an Outlaw wrestling promotion, I come in and I take over the original, and I try to do it better than the original, but I just can't because I don't have the original good shit. And speaking of the man with the good shit, he is the man with the master of music, the man who will rap you till you cry and then make you smile and then make you cry again. He's the man who has a way with the ladies, and when I mean with the ladies, I mean with his mom. It's Sean McCarty. How you doing?
I love my mom very much. She's a wonderful lady, and she deserves the utmost respect. And I'm going to be honest with you folks. I know that you're probably a little surprised that Skylar's steering the ship on this one. I gave him the reins completely because these past 2 days I have been absolutely straight up exhausted. So it was absolutely colder. It was colder in hell in Connecticut this past couple of days. It was, I think the high on Saturday was 14 degrees, which is nothing compared to like the Adirondacks in Canada and like some of the Rockies. I understand that. But for Connecticut, it was pretty damn cold. And all my buddies were like, oh, I want to hang and have a barbecue, but it's too cold and wham, I don't want to wear layers. And I said, you know what? I'm going to barbecue. I'm going to grill. If y'all want to be bitches, you can be bitches inside, and I will be the grill master Nordsman outside. And slowly but surely, all of my boys came to, and we decided to have a burger and, you know, a barbecue, a real-life barbecue, not just the one from ACPW. We did that, and then we went to Dave & Buster's afterwards, and that was yesterday. And then this morning and this afternoon, I went to two or three different churches doing church services because I do a lot of singing and I'm in a bunch of different choir groups. So it has been just a nonstop back and forth between burgers and singing, and I've been running around like a chicken with his head cut off. I say without getting sued by Foghorn Leghorn, that is why I have given the reins to Skylar, because I hardly had the time for this podcast, but Skylar, I knew where my inefficiencies would be very apparent. You would be able to fill in those gaps.
Well, I'll try to ease you into today's show, and we'll keep going on and on and on. And hopefully we won't bore you with the news of the week.
Coming straight to you from the Golden Gate Garage, this is the WrestleNews with Skylar Greenberg.
That's right, folks. It is the news of the week, and we are going to all the places, WWE, AEW, wherever we need to go to tell you about the latest happenings in professional wrestling. Sean, are you ready?
Let's do it. What do you got?
Well, we're still in the fallout of the Royal Rumble, but there have been some mighty praises and some criticisms that have been laid out for the Royal Rumble pay-per-view.
I can't wait to hear them.
I mean, the first and most obvious praise is that everyone has been glowing over the performance of Gunther.
Oh, well, how could you not? How could you not be impressed with what Gunther did during that whole matchup?
Especially because he did it in his first time, and he's only been wrestling. He's only wrestled the Royal Rumble his first time, did an hour Broadway, and just, again, beautiful.
Well, yeah. I mean, he now has the longest time. I mean, Broadway implies that there was a draw, which there wasn't, because Cody did win. But the fact that he lasted the longest time in his first Rumble and really made everyone around him look better as well as make himself look better. Like you and I have talked about it before, Sky. That man knows how to keep himself and do everything that's exactly right for him to do. And it was only more showcased in that Rumble than it's been in the past year that he's been on main roster television.
Right. Now, one of the teases of a match that will happen in the future is possibly Gunther versus Brock Lesnar. It has not been teased for this year's WrestleMania, but has been stated that it could happen down the line. Apparently, WWE is still deciding what they want to do with Gunther, but the latest idea that's come up is him versus Drew McIntyre for the Intercontinental Championship.
Yeah, I can relate to that in WWE's play. I find myself, especially here in season 4, knowing that of the fantasy booking that we're going to do at the end of this month, folks, because we have some reviews that we've got to do. We've got an Elimination Chamber to go through. We've got Skylar's Sasha Banks match to review. So at the end of this month, ACPW and NWL. But the whole reason I brought that up is that I'm finding it difficult because Walter's so good to know exactly where to put him and place him on the card to keep him as relevant as he should be. And Drew, I think, is going to be a good opponent for him in that case because they will probably tear the house down to perhaps have the match of the weekend.
Right. Now, there is also still some arguments for Sheamus getting that spot. And there has been talk of a triple threat. I'm not as in love with it. But, I mean, if you put Drew and Sheamus and Gunther in a triple threat, I think that would still be fun.
I mean, you know that there's going to be a level of psychology that's not going to be present the second you do that. But it's not like we're not going to get stiff men beating the absolute piss out of each other. I think that's going to look the most realistic, like 3 people fighting, than any triple threat we've seen in recent memory. That's usually just a couple of spots. One guy comes out, the next 2 do spots. One guy comes out, the next 2 do spots, and so on and so forth. So,
right. I mean, we'll see what happens. But either way, Gunther is someone to watch as we head down WrestleMania. And speaking of that, there was also praise at the Rumble specifically for Logan Paul and Ricochet being able to pull off that spot in the middle of the match.
That was a hell of a spot, that double springboard clothesline. I mean, that was a tough thing to get coordinated, and any misrotation, and that could have hurt either of those individuals. So it was a hell of a spot. Would I necessarily ever want to see it again? Probably not. But it was great for the moment that it was, and definitely my hat's off to both of them.
Right. And, of course, Ricochet, we always know he's good. But the praise for Logan Paul being so young in his career and being able to pick this up so quickly.
Yeah, he's picking it up at the level that everybody said that Ronda Rousey was picking it up and wasn't. Remember when Ronda Rousey first came along and everyone's like, oh, she's the next Kurt Angle, she's the next Kurt Angle, she's picking it up so quickly. And then she had a good match that Triple H and Kurt Angle did 95% of the work on. And then she had a couple matches here and there, and then it was very clear that she was not the next coming of Kurt Angle. Logan Paul, for his own gimmick, has come along a lot, I would say a lot more like Kurt Angle than Ronda Rousey has.
Who would you argue is better, Pat McAfee or Logan Paul?
Well, I would say that Logan Paul is still kind of green in a lot of ways. I mean, he definitely understands how to irritate people. And I think that's his best quality. And that's why when he came back in the Rumble as a heel, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. This is going to be absolutely fantastic. And he knows that side of professional wrestling. Now it's just kind of filling in the psychology of having a proper match in and of itself. Thankfully, you don't need that as much in a match like the Rumble. So it doesn't, you're not necessarily tasked with being on your level psychologically all the way through. I think Pat has a much better understanding all the way through of going through a match. And if there was somebody who I could even partially trust to lead a match, I would trust Pat McAfee over Logan Paul on that basis, because Pat has shown me he understands psychologically the business better.
Right. I mean, we know that Pat McAfee has said that he's been trained by Rip Rogers, and we know that Logan Paul has spent some time with Shawn Michaels, but honestly, between the two, we know that Rip Rogers has a longer collection of matches versus Shawn Michaels, who wrestles a Shawn Michaels match.
Well, and that's the other thing, too. It's like, I think back to the Pat McAfee matches that don't involve Vince McMahon, and all of them are different, and he did different things in them. Like, he had a couple, like, standard moves that he made, but, like, all in all, he diversified his moveset. He diversified what went where and how it was layered in context of what they had already built to. And like you said, Sky, Shawn Michaels was graduated from the Ric Flair school of wrestle the exact same match the exact same way all the time. But the formula is so good that no one's going to care. Unfortunately, I don't think Logan Paul's going to have that luxury of doing such, especially because I think the bar and the standard on him is going to be much higher, considering how much he's impressed up to this point.
True, but you never know because he is working with good opponents. That's the one kind of advantage that Pat McAfee and Logan Paul have, is that Ronda Rousey didn't get good opponents, especially the second run.
Yeah, and I really do. You and I talked about it before. As much as I've had my issues with Ronda Rousey, I do kind of empathize with her, considering that the fodder she had to deal with in 2022, losing to Liv Morgan, well, once, but inevitably, no, twice. She lost to her twice, didn't she?
Yep.
Oh, man. It's and Ronda, say what you want about Ronda, but as an image, a UFC fighter losing to Liv twice, like, I'd be mad about that. I'd be genuinely mad about that, especially if you had made a reputation of being a whiny little bitch who doesn't respect the wrestling business. But even still, your perception that you're a UFC fighter and you're losing to a short 5'4" pixie would piss me off.
Right. Now, the other praise went to Roxanne Perez for her short time in the Rumble. The reason why the Rumble appearance for her was kept short was because she had to defend the NXT Women's Championship at Vengeance Day, and they didn't want to have an injury cause them to have to switch up that main event.
You cannot blame them for that, especially with the tumultuous manner in which she won the belt. The last thing you want to do is really derail her by having her get injured and then having to take that belt right off of her. So, smart call.
Now, as far as criticisms go, Nia Jax.
I mean...
And to be clear, the thing with Nia Jax, and this is what I've heard, this is not confirmed by anybody, is that this was a one-off appearance, but WWE wasn't happy about the fact that her physical ability was not up to par.
I mean, she looked more immobile than she was when she left. And I didn't think that was possible. That was like when they told Yoko, go lose 100 pounds, and he ended up coming back with 100 more pounds on him. And it's like, Yoko, what are you doing? Because he was getting people to sneak in buckets of chicken. I'm not saying that's what Nia Jax is doing, but, like, if you're going to show up for the Rumble, don't show up with crumbs on your face. Show up somewhat in shape, ready to work. And also, it's not her fault that Kevin Dunn completely botched how she came in, which made it even worse.
That is true, but her performance left a lot to be desired. Apparently, the concert with Hardy was widely panned.
Who would have liked that? Yeah, I got nobody.
I mean, I think they were trying to go for country music. They just couldn't get a bigger artist to sign on. And the problem they had was that when Hardy was there, apparently the crowd was on their hands and feet, not clapping, just watching.
Well, that's another thing, too. It sounded to me like they didn't even do a good sound check. Like, because there were pieces and instruments that I don't think I heard in that whole thing. It didn't sound like it was very well balanced audibly, and that's really a production issue. So we might be able to pin a little bit of that Hardy performance, as bad as he was, the singer, quote unquote. We can give Kevin Dunn a little bit of that heat too. Why haven't they fired him yet?
Heat.
Tell me why. Oh, right, Vince is back. My bad. Keep going.
Yeah, and the fact that any plans that they did have to fire him will not be not going to happen. But yeah, that was widely panned. And lastly, what was widely panned was a certain Mountain Dew pitch black match. And there was a lot of things that were wrong with that match. Apparently, LA Knight hasn't gotten any of it. It's mostly on Bray Wyatt, but also production for that match, too.
Well, LA Knight tried. I think everybody recognized LA Knight did his damnedest with the material that he was given. And to be his credit, he was kind of getting over despite the fact he was working with Bray Wyatt, and that takes skill.
Yeah.
But Bray, I mean, you know what the most disappointing thing about that whole thing for me was? Is like we saw that match, and the production was bad, and the camera angles were bad, and the blacklight idea was bad, and Bray Wyatt did the thing with the mask and the blacklight and the puppets, and it was kind of just a reaffirmation to everybody like, oh no, this is the same Bray Wyatt shit. Nothing really has changed here, has it? And I think that's why everyone is already souring on seeing anything with him. Like Bray Wyatt said before, like, Uncle Howdy's so much more than you think. And everybody I saw in the comment section was like, okay, bud, sure. Eat your oatmeal, kid. Take your pills and sit back down in the rocking chair.
Yeah, so, I mean, at the end of the day, it just is what it is. Now, let's go on to the winner of the Royal Rumble, Cody Rhodes.
Yes.
Now, Cody Rhodes did an interview on After the Bell and talking to Corey Graves, and Kevin Patrick. And he was talking about his run up to this moment. And I want to dissect this interview. So I'm going to give you the quotes, and you give me your reaction to it.
Okay.
This is about Cody Rhodes talking about his time as Stardust and when he was leaving WWE. Let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready. I'm not just ready.
All right.
I'm ready, Freddy.
All right. So Cody Rhodes, quote, I'm at the TV hotel at the smaller market. We're at a Best Western, which was the TV hotel, shockingly. And I'm not knocking our Best Westerns out there, people. But anyways, I'm at this Best Western. And I'm sitting in a rental car with Brandy. It's freezing because we are in Scranton, Pennsylvania. It's freezing. Freezing. We were outside the bus. Crew bus was right in front of us. It had The Rock and Cena from the second Mania 29 match. So we've been seeing this bus for over a year now, but the story has been going on for 2 years. Okay, with me so far?
I'm with you so far.
You can't confirm that Scranton, Pennsylvania gets cold as shit, right?
Yeah, Pennsylvania gets colder temperatures than we do. Here in Connecticut, like we stay mostly in the, kind of the low 30s to the 40s for most, at least it has for most of this year. They get like into the teens and 20s in like October. It's cold.
Anyways, so this story, the John Cena versus The Rock saga, was wonderful, but when you're on the card, not close to that, and at my level, I've been chipping away a little bit, brass rings here and there, but I haven't broken through by any means. I just got so tired of seeing their dang faces. I love John. He was my role model in the business. He's a rental car guy with me until he got a bus. But as much as I did, I was just getting so upset, I told her I can't keep looking at the same guys. I can't. Reaction?
So what he's saying is that he started getting annoyed because The Rock and Cena kept having the spot, basically what everyone was saying at the time.
Yep. I mean, there was a lot of truth when Cena said that The Rock is only here for a paycheck and only here to make himself look good.
Well, he wouldn't have beaten Punk otherwise. I mean, that's a fact. Now,
this is the funny part. I'm just going to say this, and then you're going to laugh at this. Cody Rhodes, I got out of the car, and I threw a Yoo-hoo glass bottle up against Dwayne Johnson's face. There might have been somebody sleeping on the screw bus for all I knew. It shattered everywhere, and I just stared at him like I wanted to fight this giant head on the side of this bus. I remember telling her, you marry a wrestler, you're marrying wrestling. As bad as this is just part of it. I got to get this out. And getting it out for me ultimately led to me leaving because it was the only way I could get out. It was pent up. It was pent up for too long.
Did you pick up the glass in the parking lot, or are you just going to let the bus drive over it and get a flat tire, Cody? Was there any consideration to the guy driving that bus? What if the guy driving that bus, every tire that he has to change comes out of his paycheck? Do you have no shame, Cody Rhodes?
Well, let me continue the interview, and then we'll get to the shame part, okay?
So, we haven't even gotten to the shameful part. All right, continue.
You never want to lower yourself in front of your beloved, in front of your wife. That was one of the hardest things for me, being Stardust in front of Brandy. That was rough. When Brandy married Cody Rhodes, he was the Intercontinental Champion. He was wrestling Randy Orton's in main events every night and tearing the joint down. Next thing you know, I'm running around in the space outfit and trying to make the best of it. But I was very dead on the inside. And we were right near a critical mass, because I remember the next conversation was, here's what needs to happen. And what I said what needs to happen was everyone told me what not to do. But I got to bet on myself, and that's what I needed to hear then.
I mean, at least what's coming out of Cody's mouth now and compared to his AEW run is definitely a lot smarter. But I don't quite, I mean, unless this is an in kayfabe interview, I don't quite buy that your actual relationship was tarnished because they made you wear face paint and look like your brother. I could see why you'd be upset. I'd see why you'd be upset, but he made it sound like, oh, my wife was thinking of leaving me because I was wearing a star on my face. And I was like, that's not really... I don't think that your relationship was that damaged on that basis.
I think what it is that, again, this is after the battle on WWE with Corey Graves, so it is a kayfabe interview. Right. But I think Cody Rhodes' point was that he was going through a lot of frustration because when he married Brandy and he was doing hot, he was the Intercontinental Champion. And again, we all said it, dashing Cody Rhodes, then undashing Cody Rhodes was some of the best work of his career.
It was a good run.
Especially that feud with Randy Orton when he was the Intercontinental Champion.
Yep, very good run. I mean, everything about that Intercontinental Championship run was solid.
Right, and that's when he married Brandy and things were going good. And now he's a lower mid-card. He's not even a lower mid-card guy. He's a jobber with a stupid gimmick, having to watch people like Cena and Rock main event. And he wanted to be in the main event and just couldn't be with his gimmick. And he got frustrated about it. And again, the whole thing about throwing the glass battle on the side of the bus because he was struggling with mental health.
Well, Vince is definitely the kind of guy who would make you want to throw a Yoo-Hoo bottle at The Rock. Especially...
And that's the thing, he ends his interview with, also to this day, I don't know why I was drinking a Yoo-Hoo.
I mean, Yoo-Hoo's not a terrible drink. I mean, I have one every 4 or 5 years or so, just to keep all the fluids running correctly in my body. You need one Yoo-Hoo every so often, but I mean, here's the thing. I know why they're trying to do this. They're trying to continue to build up the layers of the roads against the company, baby. And all the pathways and adversity that Cody had to fight to finally get his crowning achievement moment here against Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. And so I know what they're doing here. I don't think that this is anywhere near as dramatic as he is making it. I think I would understand being frustrated. I understand leaving. But considering who you became bedfellows with when you left WWE, was you leaving really the best thing for you? Because all you really did, Cody, was find people who were clearly your lessers and group yourself with them so you instantly looked better by comparison in the ring. and that's what led to this whole gimmick, and the fact that people despised that when you left AEW, I think also kind of goes to show that you leaving didn't really change much either. It just allowed you to step into, I guess, a different kind of Cody Rhodes that has blonde hair and is insufferable when his wife is also on the microphone or near him.
I think at the end of the day, he's trying to spin a story, and again, spin the story that you need to in order to sell the money, right?
Right, like, again, I'm not trying to, like, fault him at all for saying the things that he's saying. That's not the point. Like, I understand why he's saying it and why he would say that, and I'm not saying that any of that is inaccurate information. Do I think it led to, I don't know if this is necessarily as babyface painful a story as some of the other stories, as sob stories in wrestling history, you know, and I also find it very intriguing that WWE is still going with some, you know, the whole idea of, yeah, the company kind of fucked with me, so now I'm gonna also kind of make the company look heel still, even though it's an older administration, while I'm ascending to the top.
The older administration is the thing that's going to get heat.
Well, the older administration is also still running the thing, so it's...
But I think here's the thing, and this is the kind of the part that kind of just wins the argument. Drew McIntyre's story was better.
Yeah, that's kind of... I guess that's kind of the point I'm making here. It's like... And Drew, I think, had more taken away from him when his moment was taken away from him.
Right. It was different because Drew was literally the chosen one, and he said it. I was the chosen one.
Yeah.
And then I got fired.
Yeah.
And I had to work my ass off in order to get back here because everyone told me I wasn't good enough.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that Cody doesn't deserve like a similar kind of thing, but I think you're right, Sky. I think this worked better with Drew, and I still think what could have been... I remember that match with Drew and Roman Reigns at Survivor Series 2020 and how much I loved that match. And I only wish that they had maybe been able to make a way to where Drew could have been the guy coming into this Mania to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I still feel like Drew very easily could have been the guy to dethrone Roman Reigns, and it just didn't work out that way. No knock on Cody Rhodes, but...
If the whole Sami Zayn storyline did not happen when it did, Roman Reigns should have lost the title at Clash of the Castle.
Don't disagree with that. And then the show would have ended, and we wouldn't have needed to hear Cardiff Wales sing American Pie.
Or at least when they sung American Pie, they could have done it off screen with Drew holding the title and the crowd being more happy about it.
Yeah. But we got what we got.
We got what we got. Anyways, we're going to go to injury reports real quickly.
Okay.
So, Nikkita Lyons in NXT tore her ACL, and she's pretty much done for the year.
Damn.
So that's kind of why I silently dropped her and then added Casey Catanzaro in the draft, in the supplemental draft, if you want to call it that.
Fair enough.
But that compares nothing. And I want you to post this picture, okay?
Oh, come on.
Even though it's really bad.
All right.
I want you to post this picture.
Here's like a 10-second warning that the photo you're about to see is pretty fucked up. So just keep that in mind as here we go. There's a countdown. 3, 2, all right, there it is. There it is. I fucked up the count, but there it is. Painful. All right, Sky, tell them what happened.
Dijak was wrestling for the North American Championship at NXT Vengeance Day. He lost to Wesley. It was because of interference with somebody else. But basically, his finger got bent. Here's the amazing part. It's not broken.
No, it's just dislocated, right?
It's just dislocated. So they're going to have to pop it back in, which I'm sure is going to hurt.
I bet. I'm sure they've already done it by now. I mean...
But either way, again, Dijak is still badass.
Yeah, it's a shame that they put him in a mask and made him a part of the worst faction in the history of pro wrestling. The Dark Order is better than Retribution. The Job Squad had stars in it. The Job Squad still had stars in it. Name me one person in Retribution that is worth a fucking sack of shit more now than they were before that gimmick or after that gimmick. At least Al Snow still had head. At least Hardcore Holly got his neck broken by Brock Lesnar and had a World's Championship match with Brock Lesnar at Rumble 04. At least the Blue Meanie got his face bashed in by JBL at ECW One Night Stand 05. What has Retribution done?
They have Mercedes Martinez for 2 weeks.
Yeah, and then she left the company. Mia Yim, that didn't work at all. Mustafa Ali, who I don't understand why they insist on trying with this rat-faced idiot. Like, he's no more Mustafa. And then
the thing is that they don't
killed gimmicks. It's I'm just happy that they're actually still trying again with Dijak instead of just letting him go after that fiasco.
Yeah, they kept him on. They're keeping a gimmick with him. Have you seen any of it?
Not really. He kind of just looks like a giant biker.
Basically, he's an 80s movies loose cop hero thing. And he talks about justice and how he's going to dish out justice.
All right, I'm with it. Good luck, Dijak. I like you.
Which, by the way, his match against Wesley for the NXT North American Championship was said to be the best match on Vengeance Day. Like, universally, it was the best match.
I'm not surprised. Dijak's always had the ability to work. It's just, you wouldn't know it for that awkward T-bar period he has.
Well, either way, I'm really happy I drafted him.
Me too. I think you're going to do him good justice.
Ooh.
Yeah, see what I did there?
But yeah, also speaking of NXT Vengeance Day, Braun Breaker defeated Grayson Waller to retain the NXT Men's Championship. Braun Breaker is going to be a star.
I love hearing Braun Breaker talk because he just reminds me of Scott. And it just makes me smile. There's something about that Steiner cadence that just kills me. And every time it just kills me hearing somebody say it and use it.
I wish it was Rex Steiner and not Braun Breaker.
I know.
It is.
I know, but it's a small price to pay. I mean, at least they're still letting him do his thing, which counts more than anything, I think.
Yeah. Anyways, we're going to move on from WWE, and we're going to go to AEW.
Oh, boy.
I don't want to be clear, though. We're going to be here at AEW for a very short amount of time, because I don't really want to talk about it that much.
I know. Well, we're still waiting for Revolution that you're going to be at, and we got a review, so we're going to have to build up to that somehow.
Yep. I mean, hell, they're still waiting for the video game to come out.
It's been pushed back again. And the reasoning is fantastic because it's been so universally dumped on for looking like horse shit that they're like, we're not going to release it until we don't get mean reviews. looks like that game is never getting released.
It's going to be basically the one, I don't know. Like, they spent so much money making that game, and I don't think it's going to, like, get amount of... It's not going to sell as much as they're hoping it's going to sell.
Oh, there's no way that game turns a profit. That game's going to do worse in revenue than the TNA game. You watch. It's not going to go well. And they're also, I guess, one of the biggest issues that they have with it is that I think they're trying to get a T rating, but there's so much gore with you could do like intergender death matches on it. So they're having a hard time getting it down to the teen rating, which is obviously helps with exposure and advertising and all of that jazz. So that's been another issue that they've been facing, at least so I've heard, mostly through Cordy and Brian and their sources, but...
Do you want to know what honestly it feels like? This is going to be a bit of a throwback, but this honestly feels like Duke Nukem Forever.
Yeah.
Remember that game?
No, go ahead, Sky.
That Duke Nukem Forever It was a game that came out 20 years after it should have, with graphics that still looked like it was in the 90s. And horribly produced, horrible mechanics, horrible violence, and wasn't anywhere close to the originals.
Yeah. It's like when No Man's Sky came out, and the original 2016 No Man's Sky was terrible. And it got shat on because it was supposed to be this revolutionary, like, open galaxy, like it's such a huge game. And they played it, and you're never supposed to be able to meet somebody, right? That was the whole thing. And then they quickly found out that you could be on the same planet and you couldn't see each other. So they spent the next 4 or 5 years just working on that game and working at it and working at it and working at it. And now it's a really fun game to play. But I don't trust that AEW and their gaming resources are going to be able to have that level of dedication to it when they can't even get to the stage of dumpy half a game that they could sell to the public.
Right, and I don't know who this game appeals to other than the few AEW fans that they have, and really the wrestlers. The AEW wrestlers just want to have a game that they can play themselves in.
Yeah, basically. It'll help the E-Fedders, of which I am one, because maybe they'll have, you could get another kind of show in on your program. But I don't know. I mean, I will try it, but am I going to spend any money on it? No.
THQ, it's being played by THQ Nordic.
Well,
anybody who has been a WWE E-Fedder knows that THQ was balls.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. Because SmackDown, there were a lot of good SmackDown versus Raws. I think that they really lost their way there's a reason they got fired from the job, though. I'm not saying there wasn't. But THQ had their list of bangers back in the day. I think that they just got a little too big for their britches, and now I just don't think that they even have any of the same personnel necessary to cater and or recreate the magic that they had, especially because it's their Nordic division. I didn't even know they had just specifically Nordic Scandinavians working on it. I mean, they're tough gaming programmers, those Scandinavians, those Nords and the Swedes. It's good workers they are.
Okay. Okay, I got nothing for that, so I'm just going to move on from that one.
Oh, God. Thank you, countries of Scandinavia, for your service. And hopefully you can get AEW Fight Forever to launch eventually.
Right. Now, Sean.
Yes.
Have you seen the video with Jon Moxley versus Adam Heyman Page, and specifically one camera shot?
The one where Moxley just deliberately blades in front of the camera, very obviously and overtly for the God and everybody to see?
Well, I also blame AEW's camera people for getting that.
Yeah. True.
And there are some people that are trying to defend that match, saying it has great technical aspects and great MMA stuff.
I mean, how hard would it have been, John, to just roll out of the ring and put yourself face down? I mean, how hard would that be? It's not. But it's the deliberate, nobody cares so we won't care attitude that I hate amongst wrestlers nowadays. And I'm not going to watch an Adam Page match. I've seen what he can do. It's not much. I mean, we're getting at, 2 or 3 buckshot lariats. He'll do a couple moves like a dead eye onto the apron. He'll do that moonsault he does every fucking match. Buckshot. Probably got countered into a Dirty Deeds, Bulldog, headlock, and either pass out or pin. I don't really care.
I know we make fun of the fact that Orange Cassidy is the one-note joke that never changes, but really, Adam Hangman Page is the one-note wrestler that hasn't changed in 4 years.
At all. There's been no depth or addition to his character other than beer, which he doesn't even do anymore.
Right. He's devolved as a character.
Yeah, literally. He had an identity at the start, and he's gotten less of an identity. His identity now is, I'm the guy who started the whole shit that started the downward spiral of AEW, both in ratings and in talent relations. But I'm not the one to blame, so, don't look at me for that. Even though it was my fault.
Look at the cancer known as CM Punk.
Yeah, it was Punk's fault. Yeah, I don't like advice because I'm an idiot. I'm like the actual Dallas Cowboys. So somebody should get Jerry Jones and Hangman Adam Page in the same room together, and they can talk about how wonderfully overhyped and inadequate they both are.
Hey, remember the 90s, man? That was cool.
Yeah, I wasn't even alive, says Adam Hangman Page, wearing butterfly jeans.
And then Jerry Jones is like, hey, didn't you used to play for me?
It was like, you want a job, kid? I'll put you right on the squad. You know what? If Jerry Jones took Hangman Adam Page and put him on the Dallas Cowboys and we did not have to see him again, I would not be upset about that.
The sad part is that Adam Hangman Page would probably be a better coach than Mike McCarthy.
He'd be a ball boy. Those butterfly jeans, he'd be a ball boy, and he would be a ball fondler at the end of the game, I think.
Ooh.
Yeah. That's the way that I suspect that would be. But enough about Adam Page. I'm done talking with that. I remember when I thought he had such a bright future, and his attitude and his mind space completely destroyed that for me. And God, that's disheartening. He should have had it all, but he made sure he's getting none.
Yeah. The last bit of news is the sad bit of news, and the main reason why this episode will be about today, the death of Lanny Poffo at age 68.
I didn't know Lanny was that old. I mean, I'm not surprised he's that old, but I didn't know he was that old. He didn't look it.
It feels weird, like, honestly.
Well, we never really thought about Lanny too much other than being Randy's brother. And we're going to talk about this when we do the spotlight, too. But he was a lot more than that in a lot of ways. I think that he's a guy that always had the ability to work, always was stymied by bad gimmicks and even worse booking. And it's a shame that there isn't more recognition on his plate and on his table, but hopefully we'll be able to rectify a little bit of that here later on in this program.
Right. It's just, we'll say it a lot when we get to it, but it's kind of hard given who his brother was.
Given who his brother was and the opportunities Lanny in turn did not get.
Yeah. But anyways, the last big hit of news is the news that is changing the music industry, the news that is changing the world itself. It's coming from Connecticut, and it's featuring two of the hottest acts in the music industry. Sean, give me those names.
Now, Skylar, before I give you those names, I want to let you know that I do not hold it against you that you said that I had no taste in music on the Royal Rumble program because I liked the male version of Rebel Heart as opposed to the female version of Rebel Heart for Johnny Gargano. I forgive you, Sky, because that led to one of the more fiery promos about AP Productions CT that I've cut. And it was so fiery that it reminded me why I like doing what we do. Because two men, only two, are changing the landscape of the music industry as we know it. White Knux and Abizzle combine a variety of styles, a variety of genres, and a variety of musical tastes and savory, delicious sounds that you can get right into your ear, so valid, so enlightening that you can actually taste them and smell them and feel them and hear them everywhere in your body. It will be a full out-of-body experience right inside your body. How? AB Productions CT, two industry-busting artists taking the music industry by storm with over 128 songs available on Spotify and Apple Music and YouTube now, as we've gotten the audio videos up with the channels of AB Productions CT. And so look for those as well. So if you don't necessarily have any of the streaming service style things like Apple Music and Spotify, they are also on YouTube, plus the entire SoundCloud collection of non-monetizable items, which is mostly Abizzle and myself just dicking around. But there's some stories, there's some sagas in SoundCloud that are just completely off the beaten path from the stuff that we normally do. It's a little bit of everything, everywhere, all at once, without the movie involved. Because there's nothing more revolutionary than catching on to the underground before it reaches the surface. And that's the opportunity that you, as fans, get here today. Look for Abizzle, spelled ABIZZLE, or White Knux, spelled WHITE, space KNUX, Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Music, anywhere you want it, that's the way you get it. Come join the entertainment revolution with AB Productions CT.
I mean, when I dissed you, it was because the fact that the Johnny Gargano song is lesser quality than the Woman one. But I mean, I'll say this. I have come around on it. I don't love it, but I've come around on it.
I also think Johnny could do something other than Rebel Heart. I feel like they could have done something like given him a different song altogether, and I would have been more okay with it. Although it can't just be the generic, like, basic EDM in the strip club music that we've been getting for a lot of people recently. I don't know who's in charge of WWE's music lately, but it's been a big old bag of booty holes.
It's Def Rebel. Like, again, let's just call it out for what it is. Def Rebel doesn't do the good work that CFOs does.
Well, no wonder they can't. Well, Rebel can't hear it. She's deaf. No wonder these songs are bad. She can't even hear what she's making. I mean, somebody get her some hearing aids, you know? God, maybe that's why we're having terrible music on this program. No wonder. How come nobody told me? I thought this is an easier solution than maybe we've all been making it.
Yes, I know. Broken Matt Hardy has to get his music in.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure Reba was the one who was doing most of the music part of that. He was just laughing and bleaching a part of his hair.
No. This is the way for Matt Hardy to get his music in. He has it say that it's Rebel, but really it's him making the music.
It's him and Jeff Hardy, because Jeff tours, you know.
Well, when he's not drinking.
Well, yeah. Hope you're doing well, anyways, Jeff. Hope you're doing well, Jeff. I don't know what you're doing, but I hope you're doing well.
Well, hopefully he's not wrestling on an Outlaw Mud show, because that's our topic.
Wow. That's you know, it's funny. That does kind of track, because the last time I heard Mud Show on television, it was Matt Hardy picking up Sammy Guevara, and he's like, oh, people will think this is a Mud Show, which it is. But give us a little background, Sky.
Well, that's the thing, though, that Matt Hardy doesn't know what the fuck a Mud Show is. And I think because of WWE's wiping of history of professional wrestling, people don't know what Outlaw and what Mud Show means. That Jim Cornette, and the reason why he bitches about all the time is just like, there's a reason why those terms existed.
Tell him.
Well, the reason is that for the longest time, the National Wrestling Alliance, or the NWA, was the major game in town in wrestling. And anyone that had to wrestle for an NWA affiliated show or an NWA Alliance show. The reason being is that the NWA was the controller of wrestling for the majority of American wrestling from the 20s up until like the 80s/90s.
Right. But that didn't stop people who were not in with the politics of the NWA. That meant that there had to be some level of outsiders who still wanted to make their presence felt and make some money in the wrestling business.
Right, which is why there were wrestling promotions, that were founded on the auspices of the NWA and attempted to run shows in NWA territory, oftentimes at what are called mud shows. The reason why they're called mud shows was because that they were done at these dinky, small buildings that oftentimes had mud on them, or sometimes even literally wrestling on mud itself.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a lot of times they would be in like rodeo stadiums and places like, anywhere they could get a ring set up, that's where they would do it. Actually, if you recall, Sky, I don't know whether you've seen any of the first like 2 or 3 TNA shows that in the June and July of 2002. Some of those early pay-per-view tapings were actually like at a rodeo, and you could see the fans actually sitting on chairs in the mud.
Because it was a show that was done in the mud.
Yes. And considering that Vince had become like the only game in town, I guess compared to a monopoly, that would make TNA, at least for the early years, Outlaw Mud Show.
Well, I think the main thing with Outlaw Mud Show and the term that was used by Jim Cornette is the way to describe the wrestling too, because the wrestling on those mud shows was not very good. I mean, granted, NWA got most of the best talent in wrestling, so those Outlaw promotions had to basically use what they had, which was often not trained professionals, and there was a lot of injuries and stuff that would happen at these Outlaw Mud shows.
Or there were some that would try to capitalize on the real names of wrestling, but they'd be, Pampero Firpo's whole promotion of, Hobo Brazil and Bruno San Martino and all the ridiculous, like, made-up names that were ever so slightly different, but would try to piggyback off the success of the WWF at the time to give you some of those things. And sometimes Firpo would get the real deal, but a lot of times he'd have his backups, so to speak. And that's another thing for Outlaw is clearly a knockoff of the real deal.
Right. Here's a good one. Jack Pfeffer.
Yeah. Yeah, Jack Pfeffer's the guy. I'm sorry. Jack Pfeffer's the one I meant to talk about, who I was talking about with the with all of the different names like Hobo Brazil. That's Jack Pfeffer's the one who did the promotion. Excuse me, I misspoke.
It's okay. But Jack Pfeffer, he may be the single, before Vince McMahon, he may be the single most detrimental thing to the history of professional wrestling in the United States, because he's the one that actually exposed it was a work in the 30s, in 1932 and 33.
Yep.
And particularly his usage of comedy / what do you call them, like not parody names, I guess, of wrestlers.
That's what I'm saying. Like the knockoffs, Hobo Brazil.
Bobby Rogers.
Yeah.
Bruno San Martino.
Yeah. That's what I was referring to. I said Pampero Firpo because he was also kind of on the fringes of a lot of that NWA stuff. But yes, Jack Pfeffer is the one who did a lot of the imitation wrestlers.
Right. So when it comes to it, like, those are the types of people that wrestling were not particularly happy about. I mean, you ask anybody, Jack Pfeffer nearly destroyed wrestling in New York and Chicago at points.
He got close. I mean, it got to the point where I know that there was some real genuine animosity between, not Vincent, well, actually, before Vincent J was Jess McMahon, who was running the Northeast and was doing a lot of that. And there was a lot of conflict with him and issues surrounding that, and really any territories, because Jack Pfeffer did a lot of stuff in Canada too, and that was another part. That's where he would make up a lot of ground, especially when he was kind of ushed out of the Northeast. But yeah, Jack Pfeffer caused a lot of problems, but is also needed for the story of pro wrestling too. To know that there was always somebody who was going to imitate what the real deal was about.
Right. One of the big ones that people don't, again, because of WWE just taking over wrestling and not telling the history, is the Dallas Wrestling War that happened in the 70s, with the 3 or 4 different promotions that were NWA associated versus people that were just running opposition to them.
Yeah. Yeah, because World Class in Houston, and there was a couple in there. I believe that there was a more Dallas leaning promotion. There were quite a few down in Texas that. What was it? Was it 4 of them that were involved in that? I mean, they all kind of took larger shots at each other at different times, though. That's the weird thing about that war. It's like one group had momentum all at different periods.
Right. There was, of course, the whole thing with the Houston Wrestling Office, which was Paul Bosch. WCCW, World Class Wrestling, that was originally called Big Time, run by Fritz. And then there were the other promotions that were running around the, basically, what do you call it? Like the fringe layers in San Antonio and stuff like that, along with the other small-time wrestling shows.
Yeah, and that's all, and because indie didn't exist back in the day, you know, that was just all these fringe outlaw promotions. And folks, we're glossing over a lot, and keep in mind, we are just giving this from a smarky peripheral knowledge. Like, there's definitely a lot of history here that we are probably doing some level of butchering towards. But in any case, a lot of these outlaw shows were necessary for the development and growth of pro wrestling, because it forced the pros to really work harder and better, and especially when those outlaw promotions had quality talent like ICW did, and the Poffos did for a long time, even though they did a lot to close in and corner Nick Goulas and Jerry Jarrett's markets there in Memphis and in Tennessee.
Right. International Championship Wrestling, or ICW, operated from 78 till 84 under Angelo Poffo in Lexington, Kentucky, and it drew the ire of Ron Fuller's Southeastern Championship Wrestling,
yep,
Nick Goulas' NWA Mid-American title, and even went into Vern Gagne's AWA territory.
Yeah, I forgot how much they spread their feelers out. But the thing was, they had talent, because Randy Savage was developing quickly, and it was very apparent to most people who were able to get their hands on tapes that he was going to be a star and a half. And, you know, for what it was worth, even though he was still young and kind of green, you know, Lanny was still a very strong contribution. They were still getting people like Eddie Gilbert and real names to work for Angelo, because Angelo was respected for the wrestling career that he had. And that's kind of set him apart, but it wasn't his territories. It wasn't his position to just kind of plop himself into all of those markets. And it worked for a while. I mean, they were able to get a lot, and then eventually they did the Memphis blow off, you know, when it was clear that they were not going to be long for this world. And they finally did end up doing the collaboration before Savage ended up leaving for the WWF anyway.
Well, before he left to the WWF, because basically what happened was that ICW ran a flame of CWA and Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler, and ICW and Continental had a lot of things, and eventually it led to Randy Savage going to Continental and having a major feud with Jerry Lawler.
Yeah.
But, I mean, ICW is one of the most infamous outlaw promotions because, as you said, it legitimately had talent. Because you had the Poffos, and you had specifically Randy Savage. You had Miss Elizabeth getting her start in there.
Yeah.
You had Ronnie Garvin. You had Crusher Bloomfield, who became later known as One Man Gang and Akeem.
Yeah.
Bob Orton Jr. wrestled for them. Rip Rogers was there. Pistol Pez Watley, Ox Baker. They had decent talents.
Yeah, that's not nobody. Those are names. Those are real names. And, you know, I really think one of the hottest things that always makes me think of it, and I always laugh about ICW, is, do you remember when we went and did the Mid-South deep dive and we caught a little taste of Poffo in, I forget who he was teaming with. It might have been an early Rick Rude that we saw.
Yeah, it was Lanny Poffo teaming with an early Rick Rude to help him gain experience.
Yeah, and what's funny is that I think it was either the week earlier of that episode that we watched, which was, I believe, right at the start of or the week after that. I can't remember, but it was either late 83 or January of 84. There's a sit down where basically Lanny Poffo is trying to pitch himself to be TA's partner, as 2 is kind of just, kind of mentoring him. And TA is like, yeah, you have a history here, and I'm happy to be able to tag, and we're going to be a new tag. We're going to take those tag titles by storm. And Lanny Poffo's doing this whole thing of like, I know I've come from the background I have, and I have the skills necessary, and we will take this Mid-South Wrestling as a tag team. I'm excited to work with Magnum TA. And then 2 comes on the microphone, and he's like, now, I got to tell you something here. I know you want a team with TA, but I know that you're a Poffo, and I don't like what the Poffos did. I don't like what any of you Poffos have done in the past, and you think I'm not going to be watching you like a hawk. You're a schemy and skeevy family, and you've done some skeevy things in the name of the Poffo family, the territories of the NWA, and I'm not going to sim for it, and I'm going to watch you like a hawk so you don't do anything to Magnum TA, the greatest wrestler alive. And it was out of nowhere, and it was the funniest thing, because I really do feel like half of that was just TA shooting, or not TA, I'm sorry, but it was 2 shooting. it was good, and it was just out of nowhere, and a great little piece of Mid-South.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that was Bill Watt being like, this outlaw motherfucker.
It's at that time, obviously, Poffo needed experience outside of ICW, and it's not like, it wasn't like Bill Watts was going to keep him for very long. I mean, he got there in the December, I think it was, of 83, and he was gone by May, June of 84, because that was by the time that the match we're about to review took place in ICW. So he didn't really stay too long down in Mid-South. And you almost have to wonder if he came down there just so he could say some shit, job a little, and leave.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I mean, he was there for a paycheck. He was there for a paycheck and was willing to do what he needed to do, so.
That's a show off. He was also he was way more of a goober wrestler. I don't know, I think we saw the match. You remember him doing that weird flail around with his hands, like after he did the flip. Like the athletics and acrobatics of Lanny were big, but he was just a goober at the time. So it was really hard to back him as more than just like a goober mid-carder, especially in a place that took things so seriously as Mid-South.
Yeah, but again, I think part of that was Bill Watts booking. But ICW is one of our famous ones. Would you consider ECW to be Outlaw?
For the time that it was, and the way that it was gritty, and and for its grit, I would say yes. But I would say that XPW was more of an Outlaw promotion than ECW, because ECW got TV time. ECW got collaboration time. XPW really didn't, ever. But they still made enough noise by showing up in ECW and trying to run the same houses as ECW. So in its own way, it became like the Outlaw of the Outlaw.
Well, the other thing, too, you have to think about is the whole thing with ECW and XPW is that ECW got support from WWE. Like, they were legitimately getting help from Vince. So, in a way, it's not Outlaw, but it is. I don't know how to describe it.
Well, but at the same time, they started in the NWA. They started it because Eastern Championship Wrestling, which is what ECW was, that was in the and that's what Paul eventually basically spat in the face of at the time. And I'm forgetting the name of the NWA president in in the 90s that Paul basically said, go fuck you, go fuck yourself, and never answered his phone calls. And I cannot remember his name right now. And Sky, I know you're next to a computer and you're probably going to find it. But in any case, that whole thing kind of by its inception means that he wouldn't be Outlaw by definition. I think what happened was they ended up just taking a grungier, grittier direction before anybody else did. And yeah, they didn't have a budget for it, but that's eventually where Vince came into play. So I don't really see ECW as that outlaw. I think that they were kind of the redheaded stepchild of wrestling and nobody really wanted to acknowledge, but nobody could look away from. Whereas XPW was somebody who was definitely looking into the wrestling business from beyond the glass.
That is true. And again, it's really fascinating because that's kind of the last, like, really famous outlaw promotion. Now, the thing is that we could say, like, any modern promotion is outlaw. It depends on what your definition of outlaw is.
Well, also, it depends on what kind of programming you're putting on. Now, one of the things that makes me disappointed about Man Scout Jake Manning, and I might as well tell this to you, Sky, because he's no longer on my program, is that there's a lot of shows that he does in front of not many people where he wrestles in a tent. He has wrestled a tent before. He has wrestled several people in a tent, and there was, I believe, like a stuffed bear involved. I've seen some shit. That is still outlaw to me, even though they say it's now indie stuff, but there is good indie stuff and there is outlaw indie stuff. And there is a huge, Chikara is outlaw indie stuff. That, you know what I mean? Like there's a difference. Northeast Wrestling is an indie promotion. There's a difference.
But there's a difference between them and Chikara, which was comedy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the Pockets and Orange Cassidy brand of wrestling. And that's the most outlaw thing. And actually, there were small hints of that in the match we're about to review. I don't know whether you noticed this, but I sure did. And the reason is that there is a trend when the fans are finally kind of tired of putting up with the stupid stuff.
Yeah, and we will go to the match of the week right now.
Operator, I'd like to order an ass whooping.
Match of the week. Match of the week. Match of the week.
That's right, folks. It's mid-1984 at ICW. It's last year of operation and possibly within its last months. It's Eddie Gilbert with his manager, Jimmy Hart, in the red versus Lanny Poffo in the white and silver. This was a weird video, I'm not going to lie, because, like, the quality is pretty bad. And, like, it's a one-camera angle shot. Like, it's a one-shotter, basically.
Yeah, which is kind of standard at the time. I mean, at least this video was saved. Most of the time, a lot of the Memphis tapes, Jarrett was just taping over the tape that they used before, not knowing that eventually this would be something that would be long sought after.
Yeah, well, that's before he knew that Vince McMahon was going to buy him out.
True.
But anyways, it's Lanny Poffo versus Eddie Gilbert. Sean, what did you think?
Now, as the resident old school wrestling fan of our little group, as far as the amount of it that I've seen, there's a case to be made with people who don't like old school wrestling about it being boring. This is the kind of match you would show them to validate that opinion. I think that old school wrestling can be very, very, very exciting. This just wasn't. This was boring. This was long. This didn't get Eddie Gilbert any heat that he was looking to get. And I don't really understand the purpose of it, even though the finish gave Eddie Gilbert the championship, and I guess they got mad at him for that. It was just, it was nothing. There was nothing to this match at all.
The biggest thing you can tell with the crowd is apathy. There's a lot of apathy in this match.
Yeah, this definitely felt like a Dolph Ziggler versus Chad Gable match. You know, it's,
actually, if you want to be more specific, Dolph Ziggler versus Alberto Del Rio.
Well, yeah, kind of. Although I think Eddie Gilbert is better than Alberto Del Rio, but but in any case, Eddie Gilbert really was known more as being a babyface at the time. This was his first kind of dabble into heelery, and he did a good job with it. I just think that this match was formatted poorly, because a lot of it was just Lanny getting the advantage over him, and then he did 2 heat spots, and that was basically the whole match.
This was the hardest part about this match is that there's a lot of Lanny Poffo doing like arm locks or wrist locks and all these different submission things, which is cool and all. Like, it's good to know that Lanny's a good technical wrestler.
All of it looks good. It looks solid. Not, that is not surprising. I do like the fact that the lighting in this particular building makes Lanny Poffo look a lot less pale than he actually is.
Yeah, it's hard to tell with the wrestling video, but like Lanny Poffo actually looks like he's in good shape.
Yeah, well, Lanny Poffo was always in good shape. He just always that lining that Mid-South had made him look paler than Sheamus, and he looked like a V-mask in flesh. It was, and this was before the trademark mustache that he would come to develop later on.
This was. Well, yeah. I don't know, this is tough because, again, I don't know. The people didn't get energized about this match, anything that was happening. And then there was, because this is the 80s, there's a lot of, like, really bad, like, animated stuff. Like, the little bit of 5 seconds we get with Elizabeth where she's in yellow, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, hey, it was great seeing her that young, though. I don't think I've ever seen pre-WWE or WWF Elizabeth, ever. So that was a shock for me.
Yeah, I mean, you can see why Miss Elizabeth, I mean, that's a fine woman right there.
She looks great. She looked great in that role. Absolutely. She sounded very clear and distinct, and you heard what she said. She did look like a Simpsons character, but that's just a product of the time. And
yeah, and also ICW's really shitty production value. I mean, you were talking about they have like maybe one light right above the ring that you could see everything.
Yeah, it looked like that scene in Robert Downey Jr.'s Sherlock Holmes when he's fighting that big dude, and not Kurgan, not speaking of wrestlers, but no, when they're down in like the bare knuckle brawling pit, and he's like talking about like countering the guy's moves and hitting him real fast and just knocking him down. That's kind of the vibe you got with with the match that was here, with way less enthusiasm in it. It was, and I don't know whether it was just me, Sky, but did it feel like Lanny was trying really hard and Eddie Gilbert was phoning it the fuck in?
I mean, Lanny was doing all the different moves. He was the one that was trying to get the people to wake up. It didn't help that Eddie was not really doing anything.
He was sleeping. He wasn't even really selling. That's the thing. Like, Lanny was trying to get these arm drags, and he's pushing, and he's flexing his muscles, and he's trying to make it look like it hurts. And then he'll get up, and he'll kind of scratch the back of his head, and he'll kind of look around a little bit. And then he'll go in. I'm like, Eddie, put in some fucking effort, man. Like, it just felt lazy. I guess maybe that's what it was. And maybe because business was not going so well at this point, maybe there was dissatisfaction with a paycheck of some description, and maybe Eddie decided, all right, fuck it, I'm not going to give him a full effort, even though he's getting the belt.
Right. Jimmy Hart is trying his best to, like, help around and stuff, but even he can't get people to care.
And, I always forgot, like, Jimmy was always an animated guy, but he really turned it up to, like, 1 million when he went to the WWF. He was a lot more, even keeled in the Memphis years leading up to him getting the megaphone. And I often forget that Jimmy Hart.
Yeah, but even here, it just kind of feels like even he feels like he's phoning it in.
Yeah, it was not the most passionate Jimmy Hart we've ever seen, and I don't know what the result of that was. And it could be that the attendance number, maybe the gate was way poorer than they had anticipated on this particular night, which is thoroughly possible if their main event is Eddie Gilbert versus Lanny Poffo. No disrespect, but Lanny, especially because Randy was, and the kind of pop he received at the end of this, Randy was coming in and being enough of a deal in ICW still to make the point. And boy, what a difference a non-steroided Randy Savage is, huh?
Yeah, it is.
That's a difference. And I want to watch a pre-WWF Randy Savage match, because I want to see the non-jacked up Randy Savage move around, because I hear that that's some of his best wrestling. But that's kind of like he's already marred by the fact that his brother is 8 times the star that Lanny is. And that's kind of apparent in how this whole thing goes down at the end.
Right, now, before we get there, at about the 9-minute and 35-second thing, the camera starts buzzing, and it basically, this was a production thing where the camera basically like fast forwarded or something, so we missed a spot.
Yeah, all we saw was Lanny just falling on Eddie and a 2 count, and I'm not quite sure what that was.
Yeah, and probably the match was fast forward. That was when people started to get, up and excited for something, but
I mean, to their credit, they did start getting people into this in the last 2 minutes. It just felt like nobody gave a shit between the first 9 minutes of this match, including Eddie Gilbert and Jimmy Hart. And the thing that bothered me the most is Jimmy creates a distraction right around this time. Jimmy creates a distraction. The referee's paying attention to him. Eddie Gilbert gets a low blow on Lanny, gets heat for all of 5 seconds, and then Lanny's back up and he's got a headlock on Eddie Gilbert. It's like you gave Eddie no heat in this match at all.
Well, that's the thing, is that they had to make Lanny Poffo look good. Part of the thing about ICW is that it was only exists to make the Poffos look good, because the people that held the championship were not particularly. Nobody held the championship except for Poffo or Savage.
Yeah, well, that would explain it, wouldn't it? And maybe that's why Eddie Gilbert's like, well, I mean, we already know what's going to happen here, but I don't know. It just, and then this finish, it was fine.
Yeah.
The finish was fine. It got people mad. It's just the match leading up to that point was so blah that it just felt like it hit you out of nowhere. And all it really wasn't anything flashy. It was, they got Poffo into the corner of the ropes. Referee was distracted with Eddie. Jimmy hits Lanny with the cane, and Eddie Gilbert pins him 1, 2, 3, and the crowd's kind of mad. And that was it. And then Randy ran in, and then they did a pre-tape of him promoting the TV network afterwards.
Yep. And then there was like this weird like wrestling thing that happened afterwards, showing more Lanny Poffo highlights. That was brightly colored, so you couldn't see anything.
Yeah, this and it had no commentary. That's probably for the best. I don't think it would have benefited from commentary, to be dead honest with you. What were they going to commentate? Oh, Lanny's got another arm lock. All right. Oh, Eddie Gilbert's got... Nope, here we go. Got another arm drag. Although, to be fair, Eddie Gilbert's selling of the arm drags and hip tosses was quite good.
Yeah, but again, there wasn't much to it.
Lanny worked his ass off. Nobody else seemed enthused. I wonder why. Do you have any landmark remarks about this wonderful excursion of ICW television?
No, we're just going to move on to Lanny Poffo's career.
Well, why don't you tell us about the career of Lanny Poffo? Because we're going to try and get him some major respect here today and finally break him free from the shackles of the shadow of his younger brother.
Isn't it his older brother?
I always thought Randy was a little younger than Lanny, but I could be wrong about that.
No, Randy was born 2 years before Lanny.
Okay. Wow, I actually didn't realize they were that close.
Yeah, Macho Man was born in 52. Lanny was born in 54. Here's a fun fact. Macho Man was born in Ohio. Lanny was born in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
That explains the accent.
So he's actually Canadian.
All right, good on him.
And you're right, that does explain the accent, because he probably grew up with a little bit of a Canadian accent.
That depends on where he was raised in the early years of his life, because that's when you develop all that shit, is in those early transformative years.
Well, he split his time between Illinois and Calgary, so, I mean, again, he probably got a little bit of the Canadian accent. I think that was when Angelo was working in Canada, right?
I'm sure he was, because Angelo got all over the place in his career. So, I believe that Angelo worked with Stampede a little bit at that time. If I'm not mistaken, or Angelo went up there for a Stampede show or two, but I could be mistaken in that. I'd have to go back and do more research than I'm currently doing.
Yeah, I believe he was working in Stampede. That's why Lanny was born there. But he grew up in Illinois, eventually became a wrestler at age 20. He wrestled in Atlanta for All South Wrestling Alliance, for a little bit. And then he went to the NWA working for Big Time Wrestling in Texas. And he spent his formative years there.
Yeah, I haven't really seen much of Lanny's work in Texas. And I don't know how much of that actually has any film to it, to tell you the truth. But Lanny definitely, you could tell that he was a much more Southern style wrestler in a lot of the presentation and the way he was. I still think that he tried to do that kind of like 1940s, like, hey, bully, kind of style with like his fists. But like, he still tried to make everything from the time I seen him look and feel as legitimate as those Texas boys tended to make it look.
Right. This is kind of indicative of how big of a star Angelo was. Angelo Poffo and Lanny Poffo in 75 won the NWA World Tag Team Championships.
Yeah. I mean,
they were the first
it.
ever father-son duo to become tag team champions. Take that, Ray and Dominic Mysterio.
Yeah, take that, WWE's majorly revisionist history.
But again, it's the whole thing is that, like, I think Lanny really benefited from Angelo Poffo's like stardom, because Angelo Poffo is really a big star in NWA history.
Oh, 100%. I mean, Angelo himself, without children, had a career worth acknowledgement and having its own spotlight, to be dead honest with you. I do find it kind of interesting that Lanny's the first one of the Poffo family we've reviewed.
Well, I think it's because we haven't gotten the chance to get the Macho. We want to at some point. We
will. We'll get to him. We don't want to do I never wanted to do the two obvious wrestlers first anyway.
Right, and the other thing, too, with Angelo is that it's hard to find his matches because he wrestled before the advent of TV.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different time.
Although I'm sure if we wanted to, we could do an Angelo Poffo match. I have a couple on the docket we could do.
But sure anyways, we could.
Lanny, within 2 years of wrestling, gets a shot at the NWA World title, losing to Terry Funk in St. Louis in 1976.
Well, there was a time when a lot of people thought that Lanny was going to be the guy, you know, because Angelo had gotten him a lot of endorsement on it. I just think that personality-wise, I don't know whether Lanny ever really found a way to express his personality in a crowd captivating way on a large scale. I think a lot of that ability that Angelo had mostly went to Randy, and it's a weird dynamic in that respect, because I think by and large the more airtight worker is Lanny, but again, it's kind of weird how brothers, some gets the talking ability and the charm, and the other gets the work.
It's kind of like with Fritz von Erich and his sons, and how each of his sons got a different part of it, but none of his sons got the entire package.
Or the Armstrongs. I mean, nobody was Bullet Bob, but Brian James talked. Brad Armstrong was the worker. I know there's a couple other ones in there as well, but that kind of, sometimes the talent gets carved up in weird ways.
Yep. Anyways, Angelo was stopped tagging at this point, and Lanny went to Crockett after St. Louis and Texas and worked at Crockett with his brother for the first time tag teaming until his brother left in 77. Again, Lanny was a singles wrestler. He got a shot. Now, this has to be like at a house show or whatever, but he wrestled against Harley Race for the NWA World Title. It's a weird thing where like wrestlers get shots at the NWA World Title on occasion.
Well, it wasn't really that out of the realm of possibility, because you got to remember at the time it was really easy to have the NWA champion because a lot of territories wanted the NWA champion along. You build a story, you go into a matchup, you end up with a 60-minute Broadway, you end with a draw, the champion goes to the next place. You could have their local star take on the NWA champion. That goes to a draw, the champion wins, and you get close, and blah, blah, blah. And then, the cycle continues, depending on how many months you want the NWA champion and how long he's dedicated for with the kind of schedule that was required of the NWA champion at the time. So I'm not surprised that Lanny in these different positions got a couple shots at him at the NWA champion, because a lot of people did. I'm not trying to say that to diminish the fact that people, only a select few, got shots at the NWA championship, but there was a lot easier way to cover for that in the territory days than there is in the age of the internet, where every title match is documented and cited.
Right, and there's a lot of interesting things that happen. In 78, he leaves the U.S. to go to the Maritimes and Canada to work for Emile Dupree, the father of former WWSer Rene Dupree, for his Atlantic Grand Prix wrestling, and he became their world champion. And he wrestled a lot in Canada, and specifically, he wrestled his brother for the first time in Canada, Randy Savage.
Now, that I did not know. I did not know that had taken place in Canada, so that's something new. So clearly he has some loyalties.
Which, by the way, Emile Dupree's Atlantic Grand Prix wrestling was a mud show or an outlaw show, because it was running under the auspices of the Toronto office of the NWA.
Well, that kind of explains the way that Angelo kind of got the idea. I'm sure that Lanny went back and said, "Hey, listen, these guys treated me well." So then, not too long after that, here comes ICW, and
let's just start our own company and make ourselves the stars of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on that basis, Sky, how can you say TNA wasn't a mud show at the start? Because was that not just about getting Jeff Jarrett the belt for like 3 years straight?
Basically.
Yes. See, there you go.
But that's the thing, is that, like, people with enough money and enough cachet in the wrestling business could start a promotion, get people on it, and, like, try and do things under the auspices of whatever NWA company was in the town.
Well, and what benefited ICW, too, is that Lanny had a recognizable career in many different places. Randy had a recognizable career in many different places, and Angelo was well respected amongst the fans at large. So when those three say, "Hey, we're starting a wrestling promotion," there's a good chance that there's going to be enough people around to back it and to actually get butts into the building. They wouldn't have done that or expanded as far as they had with some level of success as an outlaw. You can't dispute that in those 4 territories had they not had the star power that they had already gained before Vince ended up catapulting Macho Man to heights that he had never been before, both in pec size and in popularity.
Well, that's the thing, though, is that Lanny it's really interesting with Lanny in particular is that he was really the star of ICW along with his brother because they were both like the holders of the world title for the majority of the 6 years that they were operating. The only other person to hold the world title was Paul Christie. It was Lanny and Randy just trading the titles back and forth, and then Paul Christie getting in there every once in a while.
Which is not a great formula for sustainability.
Nope.
Which, I mean, it's okay after, once in a while, but if you're going to do that for 6 consecutive years, people are going to eventually get sick of the Poffos. And, I mean, that is kind of what happened at that point. And I think that also might attribute to the disinterest in Lanny facing Eddie Gilbert in the match we were just talking about.
Right, because we all knew that Lanny was going to be the star of the match. Even though Eddie Gilbert won, the match was made purely to make Lanny look good.
Yeah, because whether Eddie was phoning it in or not, that really was it. It's Lanny got, by all accounts, if anyone was watching that match looking and through the lens of legitimate competition, Lanny Poffo beat Eddie Gilbert for 10 whole minutes, save for a low blow and Jimmy Hart hitting him with a cane. That was all Lanny Poffo dominated. Like Brock Lesnar dominated Eddie Gilbert until the manager got involved.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Anyways, we saw that hot cup of coffee in Mid-South before him and his brother Randy jumped ship to CWA Continental because basically Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler had enough. Like, okay, we need to put ICW down. We're going to bring over its biggest stars and we're going to beat them.
Well, and at that point, the business had been down far enough that they didn't really have much more options than to finally do this big blow off of these promotions. I mean, that's where it was. ICW, whether it was not going to survive, whether Lanny and Randy went over to Continental or not.
Yeah,
and
I mean, the highlight of that time in CWA was a feud with the Rock and Roll Express in the summer of '84, which I've heard those matches were really good between Lanny, Randy, and the Rock and Roll. The problem was that Jerry Jarrett doesn't know how to produce things.
Yeah,
so none of that.
It's a shame.
I need to check the Peacock and see if Continental actually has like any surviving tapes.
It's not a lot, and I know that whatever is around, Jerry Lawler owns most of, because WWE didn't buy it all from him. He still owns a good chunk of the Memphis tapes, or at least whatever's available of it. At least to the last of my knowledge. I know he sold a good chunk of it to WWE, but I know that he still carries some.
But my question is why?
Well, I imagine that a lot of it he wanted to put to, more of a public domain so that people could see it. I mean, a lot of the Memphis stuff is now public domain, if I'm not mistaken, which is why you see a lot of it on YouTube. At least what can be found. Because he didn't want it to go exclusively to WWE and have it never be seen again without being filtered by NBC executives. I mean, this was long before that was even in the equation, but Jerry was always kind of cards close to the chest when it came to the footage.
Yeah, which, by the way, if you want to talk about the territories that WWE has on Peacock right now, it's World Class Championship Wrestling, AWA, Mid-Atlantic, Mid-South, Smoky Wrestling, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and just this little small thing called South Paul Regional.
Yeah, I love that WWE still has the balls to put that in the actual territory wrestling. I think that's hilarious that they're like, yeah, this is a territory, totally.
When it came out, it was kind of funny because, like, at least they're doing a good parody of 80s wrestling.
Yeah, now you're just being a dick about it. It's just like, now you're just doing that just to shit on territories. And I love that John Cena was the proverbial Bill Watts.
I mean, it was fun to watch them do it because, like, they knew what they were doing, and it was... It poked fun at the ridiculousness of 80s wrestling, which is truly
It
bad,
was.
like,
It was. But back to Poffo.
Back to Poffo. He leaves Continental in 85 along with his brother and joins the World Wrestling Federation as Leaping Lanny.
Which, at this point, Leaping Lanny couldn't do nearly as many leaps as he had been able to in the 70s and early 80s. We didn't really mention the beginning of that match with Eddie Gilbert and Lanny. Most of that was Eddie Gilbert just getting into the corner and then Lanny Poffo just flipping around him. And it was kind of weird, but that's kind of what I was talking about with the whole dancing and the Outlaw and the play kicks kind of thing. That's part of the kind of shenaniganery that I think probably hurt ICW come hell or high water, getting a little too cartoony in that, even though it's technically athleticism, But there were a lot less leaps in Lanny when he got to WWF. And that's why I think, and especially because Vince was so much more interested in Randy's personality, which was the paranoid, bombastic, over-the-top, thing that he was looking for. And Lanny just didn't really have that. So he got stymied with the I'm going to read poetry in a college graduate outfit as the Genius.
Well, here's the thing. The Genius didn't become a thing until 1989. He spent 4 years basically as enhancement talent, getting his ass kicked up and down house shows by WWF careers.
Which goes to show exactly the kind of value that they saw in him versus what they saw in Randy. And that's really says it all when it comes to Lanny, because that's, I believe, his reputation to this day, when what we just talked about, Sky, clearly indicated that Lanny was very much an equal, if not more important than Randy was throughout the 70s and into the mid 80s until that script started to flip.
Right. But again, the whole thing is that he becomes the Genius, and basically what he did is that he did cheap heat. All he did was really cheap heat.
Well, because that's all the Genius was meant to do. He barely ever wrestled. He was just there to say dumb shit, and then everyone would be like, okay, boo, and then that would be it. And he'd just kind of sit in the corner, and that would be, and Vince just made like a complete mockery of Lanny to the point where really that gimmick basically just put his career straight into the toilet. And then as the 90s started showing up and, the injuries started catching up with him and his popularity was clearly gone, that's when he started doing a lot less on a majorly public level and started going into kind of the indie level again.
Well, here's the thing, though, that the Genius got enough cheap heat that he got a match on November 5th on Saturday Night's Main Event against WWF champion Hulk Hogan.
Oh, yeah. I've actually seen that match.
Which, by the way, folks, I debated about whether or not that should have been the match of the week, but the only thing is that match is a lot of Lanny Poffo doing the same exact thing of, I'm going to taunt you and then knock shit to the crowd and not really wrestle a match.
And then Hulk Hogan.
Once you've seen one Hulk Hogan match, you've seen every Hulk Hogan match.
Yeah. Especially one where you know that they have no shot of coming anywhere close to beating Hulk Hogan in the Hulkamania era.
Right. It just, again, this match with Lanny and Hogan, I debated it, and there was like weird interference with Mr. Perfect at ringside, I don't know what the hell type of angle it was.
Not that it was ever going to go anywhere with Hogan and the Genius, but it's just a shame because I think that there was an opportunity there. If Vince obviously saw the stardom in Randy, and there was no way that Lanny was ever going to achieve anything near that in the same company as the same company that's treating Randy like that. You know what I mean? Like,
except you want to know something funny, Sean? Lanny Poffo won that match against Hulk Hogan, and it was the first time that Hulk Hogan lost a match in 2.5 years.
Yeah, but that was by disqualification, wasn't it?
It was because Mr. Perfect hit Hulk Hogan in the back with a belt while Lanny had the referee distracted and the referee counted out Hulk Hogan.
Oh, count out. There it is. Yep.
Although Hulk Hogan did his damnedest to get up to the ropes at 9 just to make sure that he looked good.
Of course. Well, of course. It can't look like the Genius actually got anywhere close to beating him. That's not how Hulk Hogan rolls. That's not how that worked for me, brother.
I mean, the high point, if you call it that, is WrestleMania 6 when Lanny Poffo got his hair cut by Brutus the Barber Beefcake.
It's probably the closest thing he was ever going to get to a WrestleMania moment. And that's kind of sad, but it's also kind of expected. Like, not to say that WCW was going to treat Lanny Poffo any better if he had went there while Randy was shooting up to the top, but you have to imagine that Lanny would have been treated at least a little bit better under Crockett. Like, I don't know. It's just you have to wonder. Because I think there would have been a better spot for Lanny there amongst the legitimate contenders and the grittier style that Crockett was presenting in 85, 86, 87. You know, it was a stacked roster, but it's not like Lanny couldn't have found his way in somewhere and get figured in.
Well, the problem is that Lanny just didn't have the size and didn't have the charisma to stand out on a roster that featured steroid after steroid after steroid.
Yeah.
And over-the-top personality over the top personality. I mean, come on. Him and Mr. Perfect lost a tag team match to Hulk Hogan and then Intercontinental Champion Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Like, again, what was Lanny going to do? And then he teamed up with the Beverly Brothers. We actually watched them manage at the SummerSlam 1982.
Yes, we did.
Which, again, that's, in a sad way, it's kind of a highlight. And one of the very few he had.
Well, it's one of the biggest pieces of exposure that they ever gave Lanny, and that's Vince did Lanny dirty when you really think about it, but what else was he supposed to do when Randy's that much better for Vince's model? You know, that's a tough position to be in as a brother. But,
and you know what the worst part is, though, is that WWF, as dirty as they did him after releasing him in 92, it's not nearly as dirty as what WCW did.
They didn't have him for very long. I forget what the story was.
No. Let me tell you the story.
Please do.
He signed a contract in 1995, and he was on contract for 4 years, but only ever wrestled 2 matches, but was promised that once he signed with WCW and once the WCW got his brother Randy Savage, that he would work with him and he would team with him and he would be able to get that thing. And Lanny basically trained himself in order to get in the best shape he possibly could to work with his brother in WCW. He was supposed to be part of the NWO along with Randy.
Could you imagine the NWO coming out, and there's Hogan cutting his big old, well, let me tell you something, brother, promo, and Savage doing the, oh yeah, and Eric Bischoff being his squirrely self, and then they hand the mic to Lanny. Well, let me tell you all, each and every one here. That would have been a riot. That would have been a complete and utter riot. He would have been so out of place, it would have been glorious.
And that's the thing, is that he even, in preparation for getting ready for this, gained like 20 pounds and bleached blonde his hair to make it look like Hogan's hair.
That's a little weird.
Because he knew that he wanted to like get in like physical shape that he knew WCW would like, and they never booked him for 5 years.
But they paid him.
But they paid him. They paid him. But
They paid him. I mean, that's Eric Bischoff's stupidity right there. That's just wasting money. Because I bet you that what it was that sign my brother or I'm not coming over, said Randy Savage. And so they're like, all right, here you go, Lanny. You'll be a part of the NWO, sure, bud. Yeah, you'll get to work with Randy all the time. Randy's coming, right? We're sure Randy's coming. All right, yeah. Not a problem, Lanny. We got Randy. Okay, all right, cool. Yeah, we'll call you, Lanny. Now, Randy, let me tell you about this story we've got.
Just keep working out, man. Just keep working out, get in shape.
Yeah,
do what you need to do. We'll call you when we're ready.
Don't call us. We'll call you.
Yeah.
Oh, poor Lanny.
And then the hard part for Lanny is that he felt so bitter about this, and also about WWE not giving him a call, that when Macho Man died, he held out for like 4 years saying, hey, if you want to induct him to the Hall of Fame, you got to induct me too.
Well, what he said was that Randy said that he didn't want to be inducted unless Lanny and Angelo were inducted with him. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I don't know. That's what Lanny said. And I don't necessarily disagree that Angelo should get in. And I feel like if Vince hadn't stymied Lanny the way that he had, maybe you could consider Lanny a contender for being in the Hall of Fame. Not that it matters in the WWE Hall of Fame. They're just going to pick who they want to pick anyway. I mean, look at the list of people in it. But
yeah.
But, at the same time, I understand the bitterness. He also got into a weird fight with that dude Hannibal, where Hannibal just decided, or the Blood Hunter. Remember that guy who like stabbed that old dude like 50 times with a spike a couple years back? Anyway, he got into a weird ass fight in the locker room that was filmed with that dude Devin Nichols, and that was a whole thing
that we don't talk about.
Lanny seemed to not really care after the whole thing. He's like, I don't know what that was, and then I just was fine.
Yeah. But then the whole thing is that he did eventually induct his brother into the Hall of Fame in 2015 with a poem, ironically.
Well, and I also think that people had a lot more respect for Lanny at that time. Not only just the fact that Lanny finally caved and said, all right, we'll put Macho in, but I also think that people respected the fact that Lanny had contributions of his own to make. I don't think they knew and understood just how important he was to the Poffo name and reputation from the 70s and 80s as the son of Angelo, and the more frequently used son of Angelo for quite some time.
It's just kind of sad that Lanny was always in his brother and father's shadow, and he just never got to the point where if Lanny had opportunity, because he wasn't a bad athlete, he wasn't a bad wrestler.
No.
It's just he never got the chance.
He never got the chance, and he always was in the shadow of his brother, not realizing that he kind of had to do the whole Matt and Jeff Hardy thing and be somewhere else to make sure that he was not always associated with his brother. In full credit to Matt Hardy, like Matt Hardy in SmackDown 02-03 made Matt Hardy a different individual than Jeff as people. And that is something that was very necessary for both of them, even though they always ended up relatively intertwined, they're brothers. They still marked their own identities out. Lanny was never able to do that, or the personality was so starkly different and one was so drastically successful that the other one just was never going to be able to match that so long as they were in the same environment.
Right, and that's the difficult part, is that at the end of the day, Lanny was just never his brother. But he's his own man, and he has his own history in the scene wrestling that
and
has
a
to be
unique
acknowledged.
voice, a very unique voice that not many wrestlers had, which was suitable for poetry, in all fairness to him. But I feel like also could have been used in different ways if it had, gone one way or the other. But in all fairness to Lanny, too, he also seemed to be the one who was more of the resigned, intellectual, book-smartish, almost pompous in that regard attitude. So, maybe there would have been a good way to use him as a heel in that respect. I don't know. It's just a shame that we once again are talking about a guy posthumously. And for one to hit here in the early stages, I liked Lanny. It's a shame to see him go.
It's a shame to see you go. Rest in peace, Lanny Poffo.
Rest in peace, Lanny, and it's and I'm glad we got a chance to talk about him, Sky. I know we had something else planned today, and we kind of had to shift gears to talk about him, but he's a guy worth talking about, and I appreciate you taking the reins on this podcast today, good sir.
Thank you, and let's be honest, at this point, the man that we were originally going to talk about is going to outlive all of us.
You very well might. But speaking of things that are going to outlive all of us, this podcast will live on, but sometimes it needs to take a nap. And that means it's time to take our first commercial break. When we get back, we've got another episode chock fullery for you. It's going to be fun. We may get to the Sasha Banks discussion that we meant to have a couple weeks ago and it didn't quite come through, but the only way you're going to know that is if you like, share, subscribe, you hit that bell button, switch it to all, so that time, every time we post, you will be the first to know. Skylar, thank you for taking the control of this video. Thank you for taking control of this podcast. Send us home, my friend.
We're going to send you home into the next year as we talk about whatever we feel like talking about, because that's what we smarts do best. We'll see you all right after this.